It's the Solid Signal podcast for the week of April 1st, 2019. It's April Fool's Day, which doesn't mean that I'm going to be giving you any false information. It's nice to know that we've kind of all outgrown that, at least as a technology culture. You see some cute little stuff coming from other companies today, but no real explicit attempts to fool you, which I think is great. I think that something like that in our internet-obsessed culture probably doesn't have a place. So let's move forward, and I really want to talk this week about AT&T. Full disclosure, Signal Group, the parent of this podcast, is an AT&T preferred dealer, so I'm naturally going to be a little predisposed to what they have to offer. Also, second, full disclosure, this isn't a political podcast, and I don't necessarily wade into that stuff. So if you think that the politics of the matter are that AT&T is too big or too small or has undue influence, I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going to disagree with you. I'm simply not going to discuss it on this podcast. What I do want to talk about is the amazing success story from AT&T that looking in the 21st century, AT&T was sort of the original high-tech company. I mean, they were the company that started putting telephones into people's houses and businesses. And that was really a huge revolution, something that we don't think about much today. But just imagine, all of a sudden, your business communications went from taking weeks, or if you had access to a telegraph, going through specialized operators and back and forth that way, to being this instant voice communication between people, which is absolutely amazing. And AT&T built on that success year after year, coming up with some pretty amazing ideas as time went on. A lot of people are aware that AT&T's research led directly to fiber optics becoming common, and they also developed the transistor, which was the predecessor to the semiconductor, which makes up pretty much every bit of electronics that we have. AT&T was, in fact, so successful, and younger people may not know this, that by the time the 1980s rolled around, they were considered too big to exist. AT&T was actually broken up into several regional and separate operating units, one for technology. There were about 6 or 7 of them for different local phone services, then long distance and business services and satellite communications. And a lot of people thought that was the end of the road for AT&T. In a lot of ways, it actually kind of was. Breaking that huge company up into pieces really made a huge difference to the way the telecommunications was marketed. It was probably the right choice at the time because it created a lot of opportunity for other companies to come around. But that opportunity, you either took advantage of it or you didn't. And by the time the 20th century came to an end, it looked like perhaps AT&T would begin to grow again. Sort of, not exactly. The thing to remember is that the company that we now know as AT&T is actually it started as a conglomerate between several of the original AT&T broken up companies, notably local phone companies, mostly from the southern half of the country. And when they all finally got together and they merged, they took on the name AT&T after having bought what was left of AT&T's long distance business, which was a shadow of its former self. The new company called itself AT&T, but prior to that it had been called SBC. And when they started growing, I have to say I wasn't incredibly impressed by them in the mid-2000s because I didn't know where they were going. Their wireless services were good, but the technology wasn't quite ready yet. And there were a lot of strong competitors back in those days, different local and regional companies. But AT&T kept pushing. They kept improving their wireless services business, not being afraid to cut loose older technologies, whatever it took. They got the exclusive contract on the iPhone back in 2007, which was potentially the largest and best technology choice that they could have made at that time. It really set the stage for a lot of people walking into AT&T stores who would have not otherwise walked into AT&T stores. And then you look at the continued pace of acquisitions, the way that they managed to integrate all of those acquisitions back into the main company, creating more and more business services. And I think that you saw a huge high point coming around in the mid-2000s, or mid-2010s, I should say. Because I really think the AT&T DirecTV acquisition was a real turning point for the company and really marked the beginning of that kind of dominant phase that they're in right now. Picking up AT&T and DirecTV meant that they picked up not only NFL Sunday Ticket, not only 25 million subscribers, but also a crack legal team that has put together some of the best contracts in the entertainment business. Now, when you look at what they've done, having recently acquired Warner Media, it's really amazing because now they've got content, they've got distribution, they have the wireless services so they can actually, send the media to where people really want them to be. And it's impressive because I think that they've done it in a way that isn't monopolistic, isn't the kind of thing that's going to get the government looking down their throats again, because they've still got strong competitors in every segment that they reach. They've still got strong competitors in cellular. They've got strong competitors in content creation, like Disney, for example. They've got strong competitors pretty much all up and down the scale, and yet they are the ones who achieved this huge amount of integration. It's time to take my hat off to AT&T because of what they've done. I'll fully admit that back in 1986, I thought they were done. And back in 2003, I wasn't 100% confident in them either. And yet, they have managed to pull it off. They've managed to become the massive telecommunications giant in the 21st century that they were back in the 19th century, which is pretty amazing. Nobody else has done it, and I don't think anybody else can.